Imagine a line of residents here in the city of Cairo, stretching back down this road spaced 1 metre apart. You would travel for some 30 miles before you would meet one Adventist. Egypt and much more coming up next. Hello and welcome to Mission 360, coming to you today from the ancient country of Egypt. The first Adventist contact with the Middle East was back in the 1870s when some Adventists in Italy sent literature to Egypt. You know, today, so many years later, the Adventist Church throughout the Middle East is really the minority of minorities. In fact, I was doing some calculating, and if you imagine a line of people stretching from here in Cairo all the way up to Beirut, Lebanon, almost 600 kilometers. And if you spaced each person just 1 meter apart, you would walk that entire line and you would meet only 3 or 4 Adventists. When we look at tremendous challenges like that, we say, who is sufficient for these things? And the answer is certainly not us. Well, we'll come back to Egypt on this program, but first up, let's travel to a totally different part of the world.
On April 9, 2014, tragedy struck Papua, Indonesia. What was a routine takeoff turned into a day of deep sadness. It took less than 30 seconds to devastate Adventist aviation and the hearts of those who loved Captain Bob Roberts, and he will be missed by many. Since Bob Roberts' death, his son Gary picked up the torch to continue his father's work as a mission pilot in Indonesia.
It's difficult and it's rewarding at the same time to come and serve where your father has dedicated a large portion of his life. We had to see definite direction from God that this is where He wanted us, because we're still working in Africa and leading several projects there that we didn't feel right about just walking away from. So it did take some time in prayer and asking for God to really open the doors for us to show us if this was His will.
Gary's brother Eric was also working as a mission pilot in Indonesia and was instrumental in keeping the Adventist aviation program going after his father's death. When he learned that Gary was coming to work, Eric happily welcomed him to the Indonesian aviation family.
He'd flown a little bit with Dad here in the years past, and so he had some idea of the area already. He knew what he was getting into, and it made, I don't want to say my job easier, but it definitely has made it easier to have Gary here.
The objectives of Adventist aviation here are to reach the areas that we can't reach through other modes of travel. We don't have many roads here. We can't travel up many of the rivers. And so aviation here really exists to share the gospel in areas that are inaccessible except by airplane.
And this is truly a mission family. Gary and team come together each morning to reflect on God's goodness and to pray that He will give them the ability to continue the work.
I can't remember exactly how many churches Dad has been directly responsible for building in Papua, but there are several, and a lot of them were built hauling loads on Sunday when everybody else was off, and really trying to keep a business running as well as keep the mission side of things running.
Really honor for Gary, because we're still dreaming the pilot like Bob, hard worker and have dedication for the church. And Bob is amazing man. He's not only hard worker, but when he went to the bush area, jungle area, he helped everybody. But thank you for God that Gary chose for join us at Indonesia and replace his daddy. I know Gary also hard worker.
I guess you could tell stories till the day is gone about the many different challenges, but it also creates the way for God to work in amazing ways. And I can say that the benefits of working in this job far outweigh the challenges.
The village of Teenyville is just one example of an area that was blessed by Bob's contributions. He visited this village to plant a church, which was eventually finished by the efforts of the aviation team. Now, a global mission pioneer works here in these highlands to spread the love of Jesus and lead people to Christ. As the gospel message continues to spread throughout the earth, please pray for projects like these. Pray that others will take up the work to complete God's mission.
So often I meet people who say, well, you know, that's great that you're a missionary, but I haven't been called to be a missionary. Well, actually everybody has been called to be a missionary. We've been given that mandate to go into all the world, and that's your neighbors across the street, that's the people who live next door, and that's the people who live in the very remote villages. And you wonder, how on earth are they going to hear about Jesus? And it's going to be through influence of an operation like this, where you go in and you meet their needs, you supply them with what they need, and share the gospel with them. And so there are tremendous rewards for anybody who's willing to trust God and to let Him be in control and do what He's asked us to do.
So it's just coming on sunset here in Giza in Egypt, on the outskirts of Cairo, and the iconic pyramids, of course, behind me. And with me is Rick Kajira, and Rick is the communication director for Adventist Mission. Rick, we're going to talk about a few things, one of which is the start of the work here in Egypt, which was...
Well, you were reading it, so why don't you share some of that with me?
I was looking at, back in 1877, a group of Adventists in Italy actually sent literature across to Egypt, up to Alexandria. So that's the first contact that we know of from Adventists, not only to Egypt, but to the entire Middle East.
Egypt was the first country
exactly
that Adventists came to in the entire Middle East, which really says something about Egypt. Now, you have been here before. Tell me a little bit about the culture here and the people.
Well, you know, I came as a tourist about a year ago, but I think that when we look at the cultures of people here in the Middle East, it seems like they have more of an emphasis on relationships that we sometimes tend to, at least in the modern West, where it's not sufficient to just go into a shop and say, I want to buy something. They will introduce themselves, shake their hands, your name, where are you from?
They want to sit down and talk and get to know each other.
That's right, and sit down. They invite you to have a cup of tea with them, etc. And it's almost like you have to build a relationship before you even have a business transaction. Right. Which is kind of a nice thing, I think. I mean, for those of us who are always rushing around, we may think, oh, that's too much, but there's something very attractive about it.
Well, yeah, I think in our rushed world, we don't take the time to really get to know people. And, you know, I'm thinking right now, people we've been talking with are saying, you know, people aren't coming to Egypt. They don't understand us. They have this misperception of us. And you can tell that they're hurt in a little way, you know, that, you know, people don't give us a chance. They believe everything they see on TV. And there are problems. But by and large, the people here are very friendly.
Well, the thing is that it's very easy to get stereotypes. And so you see in the news that there was this bombing here or bombing there, and suddenly you then say, well, all of the country must be like this and all the people must be like this. But it was interesting talking to our Bedouin guide earlier when he just said, I hope you don't say bad things about Egypt. That was very important to him.
That was very important to him. You know, one of the things that as we're working in mission, that we need to remember some of those same principles of getting to know people, and that's Christ's method.
Yeah, the very step of saying, before we go too much further, I'm going to find out about you and this is me, that's a very nice platform for any relationship.
Well, and Christ was in this region.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no wonder that that's a method, but it's a method that works with people anywhere because people are people.
That's right.
And you build that relationship of trust, and then it's much easier. And in particular in this region of the world, because as Adventists we have a lot in common in terms of diet and things like that can, and not using alcohol.
Yes.
That really can open doors in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, unfortunately in many countries around here, if you were to say that you are a Christian, their immediate assumption is what they have seen from Hollywood movies. So they will think that you are sexually promiscuous, they'll think that you drink alcohol, they think that you curse and swear. I mean, the whole list of things that they judge Christianity by because of what they have seen, and certain behaviors that they have observed of Christians. So it's something that we need to be very conscious of.
So there are misperceptions from both sides.
Right.
So at some point we need to bridge those misunderstandings and find the common ground, and I think that we can make a difference in the world.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful to see that Adventists in this region of the world are looking for ways that they can make a holistic contribution to society. So they're looking at what are the needs of people, and there are tremendous needs here. I mean, there are needs of education, there are needs of people who are living in poverty, and and health needs, tremendous health needs. And so we as Adventists do have something that we can contribute to society in a positive way.
And just recently I was in another country and we were talking with somebody, as you said, getting to know him, sitting down and talking with him, and he offered us tea. And as we talked, one of the things he said is, I am struggling with smoking. I've tried and tried to quit over and over again. And we as Adventists have done a tremendous amount on helping people to stop smoking. So there are wonderful opportunities.
Yeah. It's interesting, Rick, to see the different cultural expectations we have, the way we operate. And we get to see a few of these things. Just like I was in India recently, and I could accidentally pick up food with the wrong hand, and if I pick it up with the wrong hand, then most Indians will say, that is just so filthy, dirty, the way that you're doing that. You go to somewhere like Thailand, and if you you actually accidentally poke your foot at somebody, point your foot at someone, that is a very rude thing to do. So being conscious of some of those things is very helpful.
Yeah, and it's not that, it's just a matter of simple understanding and respect for the culture.
Yeah.
And not doing things that easily offend and immediately offend. And that takes time, to fly in and fly out and expect to make a huge difference versus living among the people, mingling with them, getting to know them, winning their confidence.
Yeah.
So.
I think too often we've seen mission as something that you go in and do, then come out. Whereas Jesus himself demonstrated to us through the incarnation that, well, here's a nice image for the desert. He came and pitched his tent among us and dwelt with us. And as I say, he put on human skin, he got his hands dirty, and often that's something we're not prepared to do.
And when people get to know you and they see the way you live, the questions come naturally. Why do you do this? Why don't you do this? What do you believe? And that's when the opportunity opens up. And it's not forced, it's a very natural progression of getting to know someone.
Exactly. Thank you, Rick, for joining me, and we'll be right back straight after this break. Welcome back to Cairo, Egypt. Next up, we travel to Pune, India with Rick McEdward.
Thank you, Gary. I'm here in India. So much color, so much spice. So many people are focusing on this country. They want to come, they want to visit, they want to see. But there is a larger challenge, and here with me is Andrew Tompkins, the Associate Director for the Center for South Asian Religions. And Andrew, we're here. Where are we at right here?
Well, we're right here in front of my home here in India.
Okay. And how long have you been coming and going to India?
Off and on for the past 9 years, actually.
All right. Tell us about how you got started here.
I got started kind of in a strange way. I was interested in going somewhere for a summer, and I ended up coming to India, liked it, came and went several more times, and eventually lived here for several years.
Wow. So that was pretty life-changing.
Yes.
In many ways.
Many ways.
It set your course in ministry.
Right.
But I think there's another way, right?
Yeah. I also found my spouse, who I'm married to now for 5 years. She is Indian, very happily married together.
And you're serving together here.
Correct.
Yeah. You know, being the associate director for the Center for South Asian Religions, it's a big responsibility. There's a lot of misunderstanding, but I wonder if for a minute you could talk about the challenge that we face in South Asia.
Yeah, there's a variety of challenges. As you hinted at the beginning, India is a complex place. Many people, they come from various social backgrounds and also various religious backgrounds. Majority are Hindu, but a huge number of Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, and then some Christians as well. That itself is a major challenge. How do you interact with all these different types of people in meaningful and respectful ways? So navigating all of that is not easy. It takes a lot of patience and learning, but we're doing that, trying our best to do that here.
Well, you know, what you're saying actually describes a really complex place, really complex people. And I mean, South Asia is made up of much more than just India. It's in Nepal, Sri Lanka, etc.
Right.
So there's actually a deeply rooted tradition of various religions.
Yes.
And as we think about that, how do you feel about the way the church has related, whether it's faith or service or God's love, to the community? Has it been the fullness to hit all these segments of society?
Right. Certainly we have seen positive things the church has done for the last more than 100 years, but also at the same time we find there have been times when maybe we haven't done as good as we could in understanding the local culture, the local religion, how best to relate to people who come from such a different background than the normal Christian that we might find in the West and so on. That has been a challenge. How do we relate to these people in a way they can understand and be respectful at the same time?
So part of your role would then be to help Christians, Adventists, understand the culture and the religious context that you live in, right?
Right. And we believe that God, of course, loves all people, and He has gone before us. And part of our job is to understand how He is already working with people and how we can join with Him in understanding those people better and then working together, training each other to also reach out beyond the normal borders that we have.
You know, when you speak of where God is working, you know, we're reminded of some beautiful stories around the world. I'm wondering if there's any story that kind of hits you that you'd like to share with our viewing audience.
Sure. As I've been here in the last few years, we've spent quite a bit of time working with young people who grew up in the church but actually have not reached out to many non-Christians. And it's been inspiring to me to watch particularly 4 young people who have spent week after week coming to me, and we engage in discussions on how best to relate to people, how best to interact with others, and they have then taken that and gone out into the community and are engaging with other types of people that in the past they would not have even talked to.
Sometimes in a multi-religious society, people tend to meet only with their own people and don't tend to get acquainted or build friendships, and it sounds from what you're saying that's happening now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's been challenging for them at times. It's not natural sometimes for us to do that, but at the same time they feel that it's been a blessing to them, not just for the people they were reaching out to, but also in their own growth and lives. They have grown spiritually through the experience.
You know, I really appreciate the thought and perseverance that you put into your work here. You know, as we think about the mission around the world, you know, Ellen White says that we should not be one-sided in our work. We should have multiple dimensions in what we do and how we present the glory of God, the love of God to the nations. And I just want to throw out to you, audience, that maybe there's a new way that you can share with your neighbor, love your community, and be the glory of God in your community. Back to you, Gary.
Welcome back to Cairo, Egypt, and more specifically to the Nile River, where most of us have heard the story of the little baby Moses adrift on the waters. Next up, a more modern day story.
In northern Thailand, a village sits high on top of the mountainous landscape. This is an ideal place to grow tea and other herbs. This region of Thailand has a strong Chinese influence. Many of the older people in the village still speak the language. Most of the younger villagers only speak Thai or local hill tribe languages. Retaining their cultural heritage has always been important to the older members of this village, but over the years, it has been a struggle to keep the Chinese language alive in the younger generations. A few years ago, 2 young Adventists in China heard about the need to revitalize the language among the youth in the community. So they left their home in China and traveled all the way to this small village in Thailand to teach Chinese to the children. Eventually, they started their own school. Parents in the community were so happy that their children could learn more about their heritage and culture. Over the years, more Chinese missionaries have come to work at this global mission center of influence. God is doing amazing things through His willing servants. The school has grown in size and support. The children like coming to this school so much that they are willing to attend this school right after their regular school. Some of them are even picked up in the truck so they don't have to make the long trek across town. Children of all ages come to learn and socialize. In recent years, they have also started a dormitory where students live and work. The Chinese missionaries gather to pray for the students who are in their care. The students get room and board and attend the local schools by day. Because they're staying in the dorm, they learn Chinese much faster. Several of the students have become Seventh-day Adventists. Thanks to the Center of Influence, many of the students are now skilled in speaking the Chinese language, and the youngest students in particular seem to learn the fastest. This school not only has academic influence, but includes spiritual education as well. Through this school, many of the children have been introduced to Jesus. They pray before class, and their lessons frequently revolve around God's Word. Each morning, dormitory students gather together for morning devotions. As breakfast is being prepared by staff members, they sing, pray, and praise God for His blessings. Jesus is making His way into the people's hearts in this village. If it wasn't for assessing the needs of this community, these children may never have wanted to learn about Jesus. Please pray that this Chinese Center of Influence will continue to bless the lives of the villagers. Pray that God's love can spread throughout Thailand and beyond. Thank you for supporting global mission projects like this.
Well, thanks for joining us on today's program, and I hope that you've been challenged and inspired by what you've seen and heard. Thank you so much for your continuing prayerful support of mission around the world. And as a small thank you for your continuing support, we'd love to send you a small book called A Taste of Travel. This book is full of recipes from all over the world. There may even be one from Egypt, I'm not sure. But it's written by Adventist Mission's Nancy Kite, and I know that you will be delighted by the different tastes that you get from these recipes. If you live in North America, just contact us and we'll be happy to send you a free copy as supplies last. Well, thanks for joining us on today's program, and I hope that you've been challenged and inspired by what you've seen and heard. Thank you so much for your continuing prayerful support of mission around the world.